Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to a video all about what I thunk of Redout. I suppose it's worth mentioning that this one feels like it came out of absolutely nowhere. It's not like I wasn't already aware of a bunch of futuristic arcade racing titles. I mean, I was keeping an eye on Formula Fusion, I was watching Grip, I was even keeping tabs on Fast Racing Neo for the Wii U, but Redout just seemed to blink into existence, almost fully formed. I'm a long-time fan of futuristic racing games. I was a huge fan of stuff like the original Wipeout, Wipeout 2097, which I think was called Wipeout XL over in the States. Had a lot of fun with other stuff like Extreme G and Roll Cage, but it just felt like, until recently, that genre hadn't seen a lot of attention. It seemed like it was either kart racing or simulation racing. None of that stuff really seemed to scratch the particular itch that I had. Now, most of the games I've mentioned here tend to fall into the combat racing category, where it's not only about finding the best racing line, it's also about making sure a rival can't jam a missile or some other devastating weapon up your tailpipe while you're trying to do the same to the guy in front. It's a tricky balance to strike, one that Redout navigates by stripping it down to its basics and focusing much more heavily on the actual racing itself. So, speaking of the racing, how is it? Well, first of all, just look at it. It is absolutely glorious. It's as smooth as silk, and it is blisteringly fast, with racetracks that seem to have more in common with roller coaster rides than anything else. Each of them benefits from this really stylish visual aesthetic and an abundance of really nice, vibrant colors. It really does stand out. There are 20 tracks in total, spread over 4 locations, and good grief, some of them are eye-watering, considering you'll have to deal with corkscrews, plunges, jumps, loops, negative G loops. Oh man, if you were wondering where the title for this game comes from, it's that. You know how you can black out when the blood rushes from your head? A Redout is what happens when blood suddenly rushes up to your head. It's why the screen will occasionally pulse red when you don't tilt the nose of your craft down, because you're probably pulling enough negative G's just going over a hill crest in this game that your head would explode like that guy out of Scanners. Now, control-wise, Redout is a little bit different from what you might expect from a game like this. I was personally expecting something similar to the Wipeout air brake system when it comes to tight cornering. You used to have to use the shoulder buttons to activate them, but Redout requires you instead to master the art of the strafe. Now, by the way, before I get in any deeper to the controls here, you will need a controller to play this. No, seriously, the only thing you're going to be achieving by using the keyboard and mouse here is giving yourself a massive handicap, and probably a high likelihood of putting your own head through your monitor out of just sheer frustration. Anyway, with that little PSA out of the way, strafing is something that you can do by nudging your right controller stick to either the left or the right, and it causes a quick little juke in either of those directions. Best used at the apex of a turn. It's basically a way of cornering even tighter, and it's pretty essential to learn, especially if you're using some of the Racecraft here that are a little bit more on the slippier side of handling. Due to the twisty vertical and nosebleed inducing nature of the tracks in this game, you'll also have to get acquainted with pitching the nose of your craft up and down at the right moment. Same as strafing, controlling pitch is done with the right analog stick. You're mainly going to be pulling it back for stuff like vertical climbs and loop-de-loops, or pushing it forward for sudden dips in the track and those infamous negative G maneuvers. If you don't do either of those properly, the game will let you know, with either the screen dimming for a blackout or pulsing red for a Redout. They're actually pretty helpful for marking those troublesome parts of the tracks that you'll need to finesse in future runs for that perfect lap, or maybe just for squeezing that extra bit of speed out in order to overtake a rival. It's pretty damn satisfying when you successfully nail all of a track's twists and turns. It's a little bit of a shame then that the game doesn't spend a little more time explaining these control mechanics, especially for new players. I mean, for old hands like me, it didn't take too long to adjust to Redout's particular groove, but even then, I was still scratching my head for a third time trying to figure out what the red pulses on the screen actually meant. For complete newbies, I can only imagine the potential frustration. Without getting a grip of those right stick skills, you'll be bouncing off barriers, grinding your craft's nose into the ground, and generally not having a great time. What's even worse, you won't exactly know why. The information is there, it's just that it's buried somewhere in the loading screens. Not a great tactic for easing players into a world of insane high-speed racing. Hopefully this is something that they can fix in the future via updates. Maybe add a few tutorials in there just to make the learning curve a little bit gentler. In terms of the Racecraft that you can pilot in Redout, you'll find that they come in 6 different varieties, 6 different teams, and a few of them seem to be direct nods to other racing games. This one, for example, here is straight out of Star Wars Podracer, which is awesome, but my personal favorite has to be this one. I don't know why, but there's just something satisfying about the design, and it just looks cool. In fact, the vast majority of them look cool, but this one especially so when you hammer down that speed boost and just watch those engines flare out. Each Racecraft also comes in several classes, each bigger and beefier than the last until you reach the Class 4 Juggernauts. Fast as hell and amazing fun to pilot just for the sheer face-melting sensation of speed you'll get out of them, especially in those later races like the ones that you race through, of all things, an active goddamn volcano, which is just freaking awesome! In place of pyrotechnics like rockets, homing missiles, and hover mines, you instead get a much more subdued selection of active power-ups to choose from here. Also, you can only pick one. There's none of that leaving high-powered weaponry strewn about the track business here. No, you're gonna have to specialize. Do you want to confuse rivals with an EMP? Drain their energy reserves to fill your own? Maybe you want to protect against rivals doing likewise. Or maybe you just want an extra speed boost waiting in reserve for that last second overtake. Each one has its uses, hopefully giving you the temporary window you'll need to get ahead. That said, I've never been entirely sure whether the EMP actually does anything to your AI rivals, but for a more long-term solution, however, there are always the passives. Passive power-ups add an interesting wrinkle to craft loadout. They boost a particular attribute of your craft outright, and I've found that when you're struggling in a particular race type, of which there are 7 in total, switching out a passive can suddenly make a tough race feel a hell of a lot more manageable. That is, unless it's a pure race, then you're kind of buggered because, yeah, there's no power-ups allowed in those ones. All power-ups cost credits to unlock and subsequently upgrade, but I've never found cash flow to be a problem in Redout. Even when it comes to buying Racecraft, the game practically showers you with cash if you are in any way competent, and you can earn even more by taking on contracts. Contracts are special stipulations that can net you that extra bit of moolah, or sometimes even a whole Racecraft, provided you pretty much win all of the things. Some are a little riskier to take on than others, some requiring a buy-in, but ultimately it's a nice way of getting players out of their comfort zone and encourages them to play around a bit with different Racecraft, considering that all of them have their own little handling quirks. You may just stumble onto a new favourite through using this system, which was certainly the case for me. When it comes to the AI that you'll be up against in Redout, I'd say challenging would be a good word to describe it. There's a level of difficulty here that makes you feel like you've genuinely achieved something by coming in within the top 3. Getting those golds is not an easy task, and this game makes you feel happy to just get a bronze sometimes. That said, the AI can very occasionally go full derp. I've had a few instances where if you haven't caught up with the race leader within the first lap or so, that's pretty much the last you will ever see of the bugger, no matter how hard you boost, no matter how perfectly you corner. Thankfully, this seems to be a very, very infrequent problem, but one that really does stick out like a sore thumb when you run foul of it. Kind of sours your experience ever so slightly, but personally I'm hoping that future updates will be able to finesse the AI and iron stuff like that out. Overall though, I am seriously blown away by how good this game is and how much fun it is to play. It just completely blindsided me, so much so that it's been legitimately tough for me to tear myself away from it. It's a clear case of just one more race, just to see if I can nail that one hairpin turn, or get through that corkscrew spin, or beat the time trial record. Honestly, if you are a fan of Wipeout, F-Zero GX, Pod, any of those classic futuristic races, you owe it to yourself to check out Redout. You will not regret it. Also, if that wasn't enough, there is an online racing option here as well, which I have yet to dive into, because I've just been busy tearing my way through all of the content that's available in career mode. There is a seriously meaty amount of stuff to complete here. It's pretty damn good. So yeah, that's what I thunk of Redout, a futuristic racer developed by 34 Big Things. 2 thumbs up, you guys. It's pretty damn friggin' great. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below. Maybe you disagreed with my assessment of Redout. Feel free to argue down there with everybody else. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.